Hello and welcome to Politics Today. I'm Farhan. Viewers, in this program, we often discuss various policy issues. One very important thing that usually we discuss around the budget time is tax collection, revenue generation and collection. But right now we are moving very close to the next budget as well, because you know that the next elections are due soon. That's why the budget will be preponed. But right before that, right before budget and the next elections, the government has introduced its 3-month-long, tax amnesty scheme. Today we are going to talk about that. We are going to talk about the economic matters relating to tax collection as well. And remember, there are many motivations that might be at play here. One, of course, is the commitment that was given by the government to the honorable courts that other cases of Panama will also be, offshore companies of Panama will also be taken into cognizance, and some mechanism will be created to sort that situation out. But that is not all. The tax code seems to have been simplified. The tax slabs seem to have been simplified. We are going to talk about all these matters and more, and try to understand what actually led to these decisions and what exactly does it mean for the future of economy. We are going to try to do that as well in today's program. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by Rana Afzal, Minister of State for Finance and Economic Affairs. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him is Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, Deputy Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And before I actually go ahead to the next guest, let me also compliment Dr. Vaqar by saying that he is one of my most favorite economists and researchers. Next to him is Tauseef Zaman Saab, Senior Member of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program as well. Rana Afzal Khan Saab, I have to start with you and I have to understand two things. One, how does this entire thing function? This amnesty, it is going to continue for 3 months. The second thing is your government is in power for something like 45 days or 50. Why would you think of something this important at the fag end of your stay in power, sir?
Well, thank you. And since it has been implemented and the ordinances are in place, I think now the practical part of providing that facility, we will be now doing some marketing, making it easy for people to understand, and it should start to function almost immediately. The opposition parties are trying to create some sort of discomfort with the people. I think we need to overcome that, and we need to talk to them. It was debated in the House, in the Senate today.
Right.
Tomorrow we are expecting a debate on this in the National Assembly. I think the debates will be over in few days,
Right.
and the perception about the whole thing will be much more clear. So it will be practically available.
I understand that. The only concern that I have at this moment is it lasts, or the scheme lasts for something like 90 days, and your government lasts for 45 or 50 days. So how does it work? How will you ensure that it is implemented when you're out of power?
I think the next government will be formed on 1st of August or at the earliest, or even after that. So the interim government is not mandated to come up with any changes in this scheme. So we have up to the 31st of July safely for this scheme to be implemented. I think this is sufficient time. I mean, you've given sufficient notice for those people who would want to benefit from this scheme. I think they have ample time.
Right.
And if our government comes in, even then, I think why should we extend the time?
Right.
The opportunity has been provided. Now the second
that
part.
I get. Before I bring in the other guest, let me help us understand the thinking process behind these, this scheme.
Okay.
What led to it and why at the very end?
I'll tell you the example of one person who had 10 million, 1 crore rupees or more, and he did not know what to do in Pakistan. of 10 years ago.
Right.
And he decided to safely park it in 2 apartments in Dubai. And those were the the circumstances of that time compelled him to do it. Today, with OECD and other, Dubai has to now declare who owns what and where did he earn. So he's now scared.
Okay.
He's not sure if he's going to be prosecuted in Dubai, if he has no answer where he brought the money from, whether he's paid it in Pakistan. So it is people like them and very big businessmen who, under difficult circumstances of Pakistan for the last decade plus, moved out of Pakistan.
Okay.
And they are those whom our opposition today is saying that they are dacoits, they are thieves, they are looters. And I think not all are. Maybe few percentage would be there. And you don't make laws, you make laws for a majority of the people.
Right.
And then on the political side and on the establishment side, we have put a ban on those people from benefiting it.
Right.
Now you said you will
anybody with a political exposure is banned from benefiting from this
Absolutely.
scheme. Right.
Now you said in the last 50 days why we have come up with this scheme. I think we were working on this scheme for almost a year.
Okay.
And,
I thought 4.5 years.
Well,
right.
Some people will say that.
Right.
We can't stop them. So almost a year, and we were working on the pros and cons. We were looking at why our previous schemes failed, how we can make this scheme successful. And then we have been talking to trade, industry, and by now there was a lot of clarity, and we were able to launch it, so we said we would do it.
Right, sir. Let me bring in Dr. Vaqar. Dr. Vaqar, your take on this amnesty scheme. And then, of course, I'm sure that the government has a version why it has chosen to actually introduce this project at the very end. You must have another explanation. Kindly.
Certainly. So first up, I think, and I agree with Rana Sahab, this amnesty has to be seen in the overall sort of ambit of 4 ordinances which the President has passed. And it is not just an amnesty scheme, it's really a reform of the entire, or changes to the entire tax code, as you said in the beginning yourself as well, you know.
We can call it tax reform? Can we?
Certainly, I mean, there are certain appreciable changes which, as both of you were discussing, should have come much earlier. For example, one really doesn't know why rationalization of taxes was sort of held back so lately. And I'm sure that people, in particularly salaried classes, very happy about the rationalization of taxes, you know. Then there are other aspects which people want to really see how those would be rolled out, particularly the entire argument about dollar-denominated assets and how people can invest in dollar-denominated bonds or assets, for example. You know. And then there is the amnesty scheme, for example. And of course, I think the taste has to be in how it is going to be implemented. People really want to see how different it is from the past 4 amnesty schemes which were recently announced, you know.
Do you think it is different?
Well, given that this amnesty certainly rationalizes the taxes alongside, it is different. Given that it promises that it will not only amend the tax law, it will also amend certain sort of accountability laws, and we really don't know at the moment which accountability laws, so that they cannot impact those people who actually declare. So just for as an example to your viewers, the National Accountability Ordinance, for example, the interpretation says that it can go after people who benefit from amnesties at any point in time in future, you know. Similarly, we are now signatories to AMLA, Anti-Money Laundering Act, you know, and we also want to be more responsible in front of FATF. So one really wants to see the debate which starts tomorrow around these laws, and they're probably, I think,
we are going to see that debate in any case. But do you think that there isn't more to it than meets the eye when it comes to nearing the elections and then introducing the scheme?
Yes. So I think, as Rana Sahab said, the government will have to do extensive outreach with those who are actually these kind of examples, which he was saying that they
Within
may
90
have
days.
wealth. Within 90 days.
Actually, 45
Yes.
days. Yeah.
Those who may be carrying wealth in, let's say, Dubai apartments or London apartments or anywhere, But
And we have that kind of documentation to actually approach the people. Apart from the people who have been, whose name came up in the Panama Papers. Or,
yes, and at least with countries with whom we have double taxation agreement, for example, we have the names, who can be lured in. But extensive outreach is required and time is very limited.
Okay, right. Let me go to Tauseef Zaman Saab. Tauseef Saab, you actually represent the very sector that we are talking about, the taxpayer, the businessman class. Can you help us understand how do you perceive this tax reform, with the air quotes, of course? Please go
It's
ahead.
a very sweet word to hear, tax reforms. Thank you for that. I remember when Mian Mohammad Nawaz Sharif Saab, when he was in opposition earlier before coming into the government, he had a clear vision of putting up a single-digit taxes across the board, right? But it did not happen till the end, right? That is, so as far as the taxes reforms or tax system, everybody knows about that. There's no magical agenda. We are finding it now that in last 45 days the magic would happen. The situation is after Mia Saab's reforms, we had this DAR economy which was going fine, and now
DAR economy. It's a new term.
That's basically now once we are entering into Miftah's era, if at all he's there, maybe for 45 days or whatever.
Miftah's era or Shahid Khaqan Abbasi's era?
Well,
There's a difference.
No,
You have to realize
from
that
Dar
he is
to
a,
Miftah.
he's an advisor. Dar Saab was a minister.
Exactly.
So Prime Minister is the finance
we are
minister
not
right
too
now.
sure. So we are not too sure if the era has evolved into the new one or it's the same one. Or when Mia Saab was in his opposition and he was advocate of single-digit taxation, So when this great thought or came into evolving the policy to this tax reform.
Why do you think it came at this late?
That's, as a matter of fact.
No, does it do anything politically for the government?
Of course.
What does it do?
Nothing doing with the business economy.
Okay.
Let me assure that. We have been witnessing since 1958, one after another, we have witnessed about a dozen of amnesty schemes.
Yeah, actually 4 were mentioned.
That's only for this government.
Okay.
So he's right. The minister
Wow.
is right that 1 year is for this one, and there were 3, 4, or 4 before this 1 year ago. So probably one amnesty scheme on average per year was given by this government.
So you are not that optimistic, right?
No. It's only like we say that we really need to look into who would be the beneficiary in a situation where your total filers are about 1.2 million and anyone who pays tax a rupee or more than that is hardly a couple of 100,000.
Okay.
Right? So what kind of pressures would it build on the taxpayers?
That's a very good question, and let me take it to Rana Afzal Khan sir. Rana sir, usually it is thought that whenever you have some kind of amnesty scheme, it has to have carrots and then sticks. With carrots, of course, you get concessions if you act in time. When you don't, you are going to face some kind of punitive, missteps in coming days. We haven't seen the sticks. We have only heard about the carrots. And then, as has been pointed out earlier, in the past there were amnesty schemes as well. Why are you confident that this time, especially when you are leaving power, it is going to work?
Well, government after government have failed to increase the tax base. And I think enough stick was used even in the martial law days, and it didn't bring any results.
Which martial days?
The last.
Pervez Musharraf's. In those days, I remember the voluntary schemes and amnesty schemes, and there was a truckload of that.
Well, you could not still increase the tax base.
Yeah.
So I think this,
Ergo, there has to be a stick. And there isn't a stick.
I thought that we have used the stick enough. Now you have to come with reforms, and you will have to make the system more acceptable to the people. Now, when you have increased the limit of tax payment from 400,000 to 1,200,000, I think a lot of traders and businessmen will now say that why are they paying 0.6% being non-filers when they can declare an income of, let's say, 1.2 million and not pay any tax and yet be a taxpayer. And once they are lured into the system, then they will also realize that by paying more tax and declaring better income, they will build up their capital and they can do bigger businesses. So I think this is a more practical approach and very close to what the business community wants. As opposed to my friend...
Might be, so with due respect, it might be a very practical approach. Nobody is doubting that. But the problem is there are too many moving parts in it. You know, you are going to just offer amnesty. On the other side, you are actually counting on the foreign governments like Dubai or the UAE for that matter, or UK or
Foreign
elsewhere
residents.
to put the pressure on such undisclosed assets, right?
No,
Where is our work?
That pressure is going to automatically happen. We are not asking any government to do
Yeah,
it.
but you're counting on it.
We are definitely counting.
What happens if Prime Minister May's government changes tomorrow? Or for that matter, UAE has a change of heart.
The principles of OED and the principles on bad money and good money adopted by all the developed countries will not change. And the scheme we would like to cash by before 31st of July.
Okay.
All the results will be in place. We are not the only ones who did it. Indonesia has done it and many other countries have done it. So for Pakistani people, Pakistani overseas people, this is an opportunity.
Yeah, but when you look at IRS, when you look at Indian, revenue organizations, usually you see quite a proactive role, and you see punishments as well. Here we are not seeing any at all. For example, if I'm not going to disclose anything, I might actually lose an opportunity. But what is there for me to lose?
I think that window that was open to take money out of Pakistan and park it comfortably in these destinations, like Switzerland, like many other tax havens, that window is no more there. So now people will be more obliged to find a way, and if the taxes are reasonable, that is an incentive for them not to opt for that option, which they were opting for before.
Right. When you look at the overall argument, it makes sense that you cannot have too many interventions, and you have to have actually, you have to leave it to the market forces and overall causation of cause and effect. Are you convinced?
Well, you see, Farooq Sahab, I think, as Rana Sahab said, foreign governments have also done it, And yes, examples of Indonesia and Argentina have surfaced. In the long run, we have to see that who are those countries who are able to successfully execute such amnesties, These are countries who have over time developed a very strong social contract between the taxpayers and the tax receivers, basically, And their foreign residents may have developed a certain level of trust on the state. Okay. We still have to develop that level of trust.
Why?
Well, I can link this to my second point, which you were just discussing with Rana Sahab, the stick part. And the stick part has to come from strengthening the audit arm of our tax authorities.
Right.
So all these announcements which we have done.
Not strengthening NAP per se. But actually looking at the tax authorities, right?
That's right. So for example, all these announcements which we have made, these 4 ordinances, they are limited to tax policy. They don't talk of reforming tax administration, the civil service that is actually going to execute this policy. Right. Unless they have the willingness to strengthen their audit facility, have forensic and risk assessment capacity, and actually implement it. Go after such people, And yes, Miftah Sahab is on record of having said that they understand they have some database of people who have stashed wealth abroad. Farooq Sahab, just to say that while when Haroon Akhtar Sahab said that he's expecting $4 to $5 billion of result from this amnesty scheme, the overall worth estimated of Pakistanis who may have taken wealth abroad is at the moment $135 billion US. So $4 billion out of $135 billion is not even a fraction. It's just a slight fraction of it, actually.
Tell me, if you recall, how many programs have we done with you sitting here and with Rana Sahab, even before he was Minister of State, he was Parliamentary Secretary for Finance. How many times have we discussed the tax administration and the idea of automation as well? Somehow, whenever it comes to it, we miss this part. Why?
Well, I wouldn't talk about Rana Sahib. He has the most difficult job in the world, being parliamentary secretary for an economy, I mean, which is, of course, going through phases.
Now he is Minister of State.
Of course. But what Tauseef Sahib was saying, you know, the term that he used, we researchers have a different term. We call it Daronomics.
Okay.
The 4 years of Mr. Dar, and with due respect to Rana Sahib, you know, have actually made the tax system more complex. You now don't have to deal with one FBR. There are provincial revenue authorities. So you have 13 revenue authorities in this country at the moment.
Is it down to Daronomics or is it down to 18th Amendment?
Well, there were certain laws and institutions which had to be finalized under the 18th Amendment by December 2015.
Okay.
That is what the Ministry of Finance at the center had to do, you know, and it still has to do, of course. There are some inter-provincial coordinations, which, of course, Punjab Revenue Authority, Sindh Revenue Board have to sit down with FRB, so that FBR, so that people are not subject to double taxation or multiple taxation, you know. This is precisely due to this reason that World Bank actually says that in Pakistan, a small business person has to invest more than 500 man-hours per year just filing taxes, you know. So you can't expect a smaller businessman to hire a fleet of chartered accountants. The larger businesses may not feel the heat, you know. So the tax administration part, the reform of it is as important as the tax policy part, which has just been announced.
Right, and that is not happening yet.
We see a lesser attention to reforming the administration part, the civil service of the revenue authorities.
That's a very interesting question that I'm leaving for Minister of State here. But you want to add to what Dr. Vaqar said? Please go ahead.
You know what happens actually in Musharraf Sera, when there was a self-assessment scheme was launched, the officers at income tax, they opted to join the custom services.
Okay.
And the custom officers went to the courts that income tax officers cannot join our cadre. No. So this is the hardcore fact at the FPR.
Was it because of the self-assessment scheme, or was it because their cadre had not seen promotions for 10, 20 years? Remember, that also happened.
You know, that
an ITO who got the job as an ITO continued to be an ITO for 20 years.
ITO? Okay. So what next? You know, we have seen countries like Maldives and UAE, where the businessmen started paying taxes, right? And the secret was not a super logic. The tax was about 5% of whatever they earn. In Maldives, there's only called bad tax, 5% of whatever is given. And they do not ask government what they are doing, and the government does not ask anything else other than this one single tax. Likewise in UAE.
Well, that kind of open-heartedness actually landed us in this mess. Offshore companies. Similar kind of.
No. What happened? You have to, as Dr. Saab said, there are so many tax authorities. There are so many tax collectors. You know, sitting in Islamabad, if I'm importing something from overseas, I have to pay Sindh provincial tax. Right. And I have argued so many times why it is happening. They say it is since it is passing through or the port is in Sindh, that's why you have to pay the Sindh provincial tax.
So are you suggesting that Pakistan should follow the example of India, which introduced GST, goods and services tax?
It should be one
by rationalizing, simplifying.
You know what is happening? You increase a tax of collective tax. If you say at the time of customs, you consider that's a custom tax only. But you end up adding so many other taxes that accumulatively in one industry you have to pay about 106% of tax value. Right? Okay. So what happens? People don't pay this 106% value. They under-invoice it. And so they rationalize themselves.
Okay. I understand when people,
Okay. So why not? And the money goes to all the tax authorities and
right.
whatever.
I totally get that. But my concern is when we are talking about taxes, we keep on talking about the same things. I don't see a concrete advocacy coming from the end users either.
let it be a
taxpayers either.
single digit taxes,
Yeah.
right? And that would be the time that we can ask overseas Pakistani and overseas at all foreigners to come and invest over here. Once we have these 65% or heavy taxes going on, and with so many other influencers on the tax system, people would let it be Pakistanis or foreigners. They would not come on the terms. You know, that is exactly what happens. Also, that
And how to build the loyalty.
you know, also
How to build the trust in the system.
once it is reasonable taxes, if you are taxing reasonably all right, and you believe that this money is going to the end users, you know,
Right.
once I know that I have to place my own security guard, I have to place my own private school, I send my kid to the private school, you know, I have to take care of clean water myself, you know, I have to provide shelter myself, you know, I have to take care of medicine of myself. So why would I, and most importantly, once I go old and there's no social security, and the money which is collected from overseas, from all the industrialists and businessmen, that money is being plundered, you know, and
With
ended
due
up in the
respect,
cases.
that argument
No.
never actually sells elsewhere in the world. You cannot link taxes that you pay with the services you receive. It is something that is thought to be mandatory.
Exactly, but it
So
is
why
not happening.
shouldn't it be? Why do I keep on adding ifs and buts here? That if you give me a road, a
No,
metal
there are two
road or
things.
water,
No,
or social security for
There are
that
two things. The volume of taxes. You know, Dr. Vaqar said that the bigger companies do not feel the heat. Actually, as a matter of fact, the bigger companies who wish to go by book, you know, they simply become uncompetitive.
okay.
That is what is happening. Let it be a large scale any sector who's following a single book,
Right.
he becomes uncompetitive.
Right. And runners up, there is a political angle to this as well. Whether it adds to your resume, your party's resume when you go into the election, whether it adds to the image or not, is yet to be seen. But the fact is that these are serious matters, and we were supposed to actually take more interest in these. Now the problem is, with an election looming, we don't know who's going to come back into power. And where is the assurance that anybody, for example, I have not declared my offshore company and I declared it today. Tomorrow somebody else comes, cancels your amnesty, takes the matter to NAB, and then NAB actually takes me to task or to cleaners.
No, I think cancelling the amnesty, a law that has been passed today, a law that has been implemented.
It is an ordinance.
It is the law, whether through ordinance or through so you cannot cancel it backdated. Maybe somebody who comes after the 31st of July and the new government in August wants to promulgate some new law, that starts from that day.
But why not actually actively reach out to other political parties, or at least parliament, and convince them, sell it?
We have been
If you're going to sell it to the business community or taxpayers, why can't you do it to the political stakeholders of the country?
We are doing it. It will happen in the. Government had. We have not violated any law.
Nobody is implying that you have. The only thing is, usually such activities of consensus building precede, introduction of such laws or such amnesties. It could have happened in the past.
I think you can say that the time constraint was there, and we have worked very hard on it. And
which time constraint, sir?
I mean, the opportunity that has come to you through the international change in international law, you cannot wait for endlessly. So the laws are implemented and the Pakistani community is then already in trouble. Then there's nobody's coming to Pakistan with his money and all.
But are we saying that the only undisclosed wealth is sitting abroad? It is not within the country?
Well, that window has also been addressed reluctantly, I would say. With payment of 5%.
But my humble submission is that you already had the atmospherics. You could create that kind of atmospherics here, locally, for the people who are not actually disclosing their wealth. You could have done it in almost 5 years.
This is, you had a legal window, which was the property, to park an X amount of illegal wealth into the property by registering it at less than 10 or 20% of its real cost. You had many other legal windows open. So now you have addressed the property parking as well, and you are trying to address this. So I think this is the best we could come up, and and we feel that this is going to be successful, alongside with some new measures in terms of automation, in terms of data banks and all that.
But we have been hearing about automation for 11, 12 years
Well,
at least.
now is the time,
and we haven't seen any automation.
We have the data now.
And now you're saying that you're going to actually connect the databases in the future, not in the past.
Definitely.
You haven't done it. You are not doing it right now. You will do it.
You mentioned somewhere in today's discussion that in the election year, it is not easy for any political party. But
so with due respect, in Pakistan, you have every year as election year, because Imran Khan and Sheikh Rashid kept on claiming that the election are going to take place in this year.
Well,
so you cannot actually postpone such important things.
I think they have made jokers out of themselves. Now it's the next government which is coming, and they will have to come very hard on these things, because we were challenged in many other areas. We have done some good work with the same FBR on which a lot of talk was made. From 2 trillion we have gone to 4 trillion. It's no mean achievement, and I think next government in the first 2-3 years will have to be, the stick will be longer than the carrot.
Yeah, and
should be.
There's a perception that that might be the case. We don't know what exactly is going to happen, but there are people who keep on coming up with conspiracy theories. They talk about the stick and use of stick by others. But sir, here's a question. I mean, I understand that a small businessman or mid-ranging businessman who might have parked their properties abroad might disclose. But there's a very interesting aspect to it. There are certain businessmen in this country, and it is said that they have become really big. They have become so big that maybe state hasn't been able to control them. One is Bahria Town, umpteen others. Surprise, surprise, when it came to the names that were disclosed in the past, Panama Papers, it was also Bahria Town's people also whose name came up. So it is basically these people who are going to benefit, nobody else.
Well, I think, Farooq Sahab, now that the law is there, so I think the focus for the next 45 days should be how to make it a success.
Okay. For the government or for everybody?
I mean, for everybody, for Pakistan, of course. And
opposition is not going to agree with you.
Well, certainly, and I'm of course, when the law wasn't there day before yesterday, I was sitting on television actually saying that for legitimate taxpayers, for genuine taxpayers in this country, I shared the sentiments of what Overseas Investor Chamber is saying, that this is discouragement for us who actually pay legitimate taxes to be in this country. And there are 92 large multinational corporations under the Overseas Investor Chamber who are working. But now, within these past...
It might have something to do with the rewarding loyalty, but there's a fact that even the best or the worst companies around the world come up with some kind of windows of concessions for people, sales for that matter.
Certainly.
When even a person who has never actually been introduced to the product can buy the same product cheaper than a loyal customer bought for much higher price.
Certainly. And I was just going to sort of just assert that point, that there are certain sort of circumstances, conditions under which this scheme may work, And that is largely to combine it with the road shows which the government is still doing. There are 2 or 3 road shows coming up under the banner of Board of Investment, which they'll be doing in London, and one in Middle East as well. They need to combine their own efforts, interdepartmental efforts, to showcase this amnesty scheme abroad.
Do you think that won't happen because Miftah Ismail, before he became the advisor of finance, was head of BOI?
First up, this is what I...
So he understands the connectivity as well.
This is what I'm hoping will happen, And then ultimately, we need to sort of make sure that while we were citing Indonesia and Argentina example, we also want to go a step ahead from them. So what happened in those schemes was that people were declaring wealth, but not bringing wealth to the country, So we want to go that extra mile given our balance of payment difficulties. We not only want a declaration of that wealth which has gone abroad, we also want that wealth here. And that is where the Article 25A of the double taxation agreement comes in. So we have these agreements with countries like Switzerland. We should make use of these laws as well, And then just my last point on this.
No, but the second point, this intent shows in the 4 ordinances that have been introduced today.
Well, the 4 ordinances sort of give us a feeling that they had exhausted this effort with the foreign governments. We believe that...
No, but bringing money back to Pakistan rather than just get a declaration of the wealth parked abroad. Is it declared in the laws?
Yes. So ideally, yes, we want a declaration and we also want to invite that money. But nobody can coerce, of course.
Okay.
There can't be a coercive effort.
But when it comes to these matters, it seems that coercion or coercive mechanism is not something that we can even talk about.
That's right.
IRS in America doesn't think that way. There are 10 other organizations around the world, they don't think that way.
They would blacklist you so that you cannot work in this country.
So why not actually do something else? Just abolish FBR and, make it all self-assessment and let's be done with it. Why do we have so much bureaucracy when they are not going to actually go out there?
Well, I think Farooq, we also have to be mindful that in this country, we actually also had episodes of coercion which actually went too far.
When was it?
I'm talking about 1970s actually.
Okay. Yeah.
That's when there was...
Nationalization?
Yes.
Yeah, that argument actually recently came up again. When, of course, there was this discussion on people, rich people, rich people being called to the courts elsewhere. There were television anchors who were saying that we should actually nationalize. And that was precisely the kind of activity that destroyed investors' confidence or trust in the system. So that shouldn't be done.
Absolutely. Yes.
But 70s are 70s.
Absolutely.
Now we are living in 2018.
And it's very delicate, and I agree with Miftah Sahab as well as Rana Sahab while he was talking earlier at another occasion, They'll need to be very careful when they approach FATF now in about 2 months' time. They have another presentation to give. And FATF would, of course, naturally ask the question that how does this amnesty not negate the AMLA and other acts?
That's actually a very important point. But Tauseef Sahab, regarding this coercive mechanism, it seems that our approach to tax, the tax defaulters or people who are committing tax, fraud, is similar to TLP or its dharnas. Once you actually try to use force, you burn your hands, and then you say, I'm never going to go close to it. Whatever happened in 70s has happened. Right. Now you have to have some kind of mechanism. Without stakes, nothing will work. Do you have any stakes in mind?
What happens that technology is indeed a stake. It's only a matter of time that we would realize we would pass through the learning curve.
And the very same argument of anybody traveling abroad without disclosing their assets in Pakistan has been repeated by at least 6th Prime Minister and 7th Finance Minister. But we don't automate. We don't connect the databases.
Rather I would like to ask the Honorable Minister that when Mia Nawaz Sharif was agreeing on the single digit tax reforms before he came into the government, why we did not implement that?
Come on, cut him some slack. He has seen so much in past 5 years.
I think we've taken enough kick that you could not absorb all that in one go. Maybe in the next go, why not?
Yeah, but this was your strength, right? You were talking about economic reforms and economic revolution, Asian tigers per se. So maybe these were the things that should have been your first priority?
I mean, these are the bases on which the economies rebound. These are tested and tried theories in other places, and why not in Pakistan?
But they don't work here.
They don't work here, and what will work here, you'll keep experimenting. Like you said, this is the 3rd or 4th amnesty we have come up with, and let's hope it works.
The same government. And that is the cherry on the top.
At least this shows our effort in reviving the economy.
That is true.
I mean,
but that
it
also
does not mean that we've given up on it.
But with due respect, that also shows a certain degree of antipathy to learning from your own mistakes.
I mean,
you keep on doing the same thing over and over
between your
again.
neighbors in Pakistan would be that they have evolved a tax culture and we have not failed. Why we have failed? because you could not even evolve a democratic system for the country that could have worked continuously for
You're
it.
saying that the common man on the street didn't have the kind of sense of
With-
ownership,
with
and that's why they
with-
haven't actually paid the
With
taxes?
system changing, and you have one system comes and the next one comes, and you find a gap to play inside.
So, but
And
tax system doesn't change in Pakistan. It is one of the monoliths
it could not
that never changes.
It could not improve, and it promoted corruption, and there was massive corruption. There still is, and that reform has to take place.
Okay, right. Has to take place.
Yes.
And that is the biggest problem here. Dr. Saab, the question that I have to actually bring to you, and mind you, we are just running short of time, is the example that you gave a couple of years ago when India was introducing GST. You said that we should have that kind of simplification of the system. Do you think that this is still an argument in Pakistan, given the hurried manner in which India introduced it, and there was sort of blowback as well?
Yes. No, but Farhan, we may not do it the India way. We can do it our way, but we eventually have to do it. There are 55 withholding taxes now. There are over 3 dozen indirect taxes in the country. You cannot do business like this. Every province, like Tauseef Saab was saying, every province is coming up erecting their own indirect taxes. Transport cess, transit cess, port cess, you know. So unless we go that way of consolidating that tax structure, what India has tried to do is to sort of bring 2 dozen indirect taxes into a single goods and services tax.
Right.
What Turkey has tried to do over the course of 7 years is to bring 32 indirect taxes into 11 indirect taxes, you know. So we ultimately have to consolidate the taxation structure to bring down cost of doing business in this country.
And someone who has studied economics in a country which hardly cares for economics, just tell me, why is it that we don't have this kind of discussion on our primetime television, in our drawing rooms, in our parliament, elsewhere?
No, that's very true. I mean,
Why?
we still don't have that national level conscious to actually give time to these subjects. People don't actually relate to
Napoleon
these.
used to say an army marches on its stomach.
No, that's
Money
true.
has something to do with the
Yes,
stomach.
yes.
So we
I
are
can-
talking about something which is so basic
Sir,
that
sir,
everybody should be talking about
Sir,
it.
I agree. But the savior of this economy has been the informal system which coexist.
Right.
The fact that undocumented economy exists, people survive on it, you know.
I can understand the informal economy. I don't understand the informal approach to imagination, where we cannot even conceptualize these things. Tauseef Saab, you have the final word, sir.
I believe that in the movement of honesty, you know, it has to come from the leadership,
Okay. Which leadership?
any leadership,
Political
Political
leadership.
any
of course.
leadership.
Okay.
I want to make a small point.
No, actually, he has made a very big point. Any leadership. Yeah.
You know, and you know, motorway example is in front of us. You know, once we know that everybody has to give challans, so everybody is paying that. So now we are all right with it.
Yeah,
we have seen,
you have to have a very strong
we have seen the
system.
seat belt process in Islamabad.
Right.
You know, now there's no challan, and still we put on a buckle up our seat belts in Islamabad.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay. So some leadership has to actually come up with this. And I don't want to read between the lines. In any
Building
case.
upon his argument, I agree with him.
Tauseef Saab or Dr. Vaqar?
Tauseef Saab's. I mean, the non-taxpayers, the tax evaders find support either in political parties or that. I think the solution is Charter of Economy, and the parties should sit down and discuss certain areas as no-go areas for politics. And unless we do that, I think it will be very difficult to trap to catch hold of the corruption in the system.
Right, and for that one has to actually have creative solutions as well.
That's right.
And one should start at the very beginning of the term, not the end. on that note, I have to actually, you want to say something else?
One should not be end-phobic.
Okay, that's quite pithy, you realize. Rana Afzal Khan Saab, Minister of State for Finance and Economic Affairs, thank you very much, sir, for your time. Dr. Vaqar Ahmed, sir, one of my favorite economists, thank you very much, sir, for your time as well. And Tauseef Zaman, sir, thank you very much, sir. Always a pleasure having you in the show as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. This discussion has to continue. The scheme is going to continue for another 89 days. Let's hope that in those days we achieve some great targets, and after that this country can also say that our people actually pay taxes rather than paying lip service to taxes. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care. Do you see any hope of India coming to its senses short of war?
India would not come to senses, but Pakistan can do quite a few things, Pakistan and Kashmiris. We should forge unity in our ranks. We should go back to the international community. We should use the combined strength of our diaspora communities across Europe, North America and the Gulf and the Asia Pacific. We should leverage the strengths we have acquired in the media. We should also make Pakistan and Azad Kashmir strong places, prosperous states. And finally, we should widen our outreach and make it much more effective. These are the options available to us.
Mr. President, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
Viewers, you have listened to the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. The situation in Kashmir seems very dire. And the problem is that as we speak, what hurts me as a citizen of a free country and a citizen of the global community is the impunity with which such incidents are treated. Repeatedly, we have seen people being blinded, killed, maimed, their lives destroyed, their properties destroyed. And yet the world doesn't even pay lip service now. Somebody has to change. If the world doesn't change, if it keeps on doing it to others, then it is probably going to happen to them as well, those countries. Because if you think that democracy can exist in another part of the world despite killing or despite subjecting people to prejudices, then for sure it will happen in America, it will happen in Europe, it will happen in so many other places, because that's how things catch on. Let us end it and start paying heed to the plight of Kashmiri people. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care.
कश्मीर Salim Manviwala sworn in as the Deputy Chairman Senate after bagging 54 votes. Chairman Senate Sadiq Sanjarani administers the oath.
Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif meets Prime Minister Shahid Khaqan Abbasi and discusses efforts for strengthening peace and stability in the region.
Foreign Minister